Okay, so well, to begin with, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Really appreciate, and it's lovely to see so many new faces, familiar faces. It's fantastic. So, for those of you who don't know me, I should introduce myself. So, I'm Wayne Holmes. I'm a professor of critical studies of AI and education at University College London in the UK. Um, and what we're doing today, the whole point of this is to launch the Critical Studies of AI in Education network. And this is our first network event, and we intend having many more. And we're calling these the last Fridays. So thanks for joining this, the launch, our first network event. And also thanks to all of you for coming to my 21st birthday celebration. Um, so our plan is to hold events like this one on the last Friday of every second month. So that's why we're calling them the last Fridays. So our next event will be in August. But anyway, back to today, and I am really very excited about our speaker, Dr. Jean Gové, and again, apologies if I mispronounce your name, who's going to be speaking on our topic today about Pope Leo's recent encyclical. But before I hand over to Dr. Gové, I just wanted to mention three recent developments that's all part of this start of this work together. First was the launch of our UNESCO chair in the ethics of artificial intelligence and education, which is co-held with Dr. Kyung-Mi Lee, who I believe is here somewhere, who is from Seoul National University in Korea, and we're working together on that. And the chair is hosted by the International Research Centre on AI under the auspices of UNESCO, which is based in Slovenia. And we are all keen for all of you on this call to play a collaborative role in the chair going forward to make sure that it's doing the kind of things that we collectively think it should be doing. The second thing I wanted to mention is our paper called Critical Studies of Artificial Intelligence in Education, Putting a Stake in the Ground. And what's important about this paper is that it's been co-authored by more than 60 members of this extended network. Some of the people on the call today played a really central role, but 60 people were involved. It's been absolutely amazing. Currently, it's a preprint. It has not been peer reviewed, but we're trying to work on that, which is not easy. But the preprint has been downloaded 4,000 times, which is very exciting. It doesn't say the paper's any good, but what that does say is that people are vaguely interested in this space, which I think is fantastic and what, where we should be heading towards. And the third thing I want to mention is the publication of the Handbook of Critical Studies of Artificial Intelligence in Education, which was published at the end of last month, last day, has 30 chapters and more than 60 authors again. And from those authors come from 20 countries from across the world, from the Far East, from North Africa, from South America, North America, Europe, pretty wide. So that's again very exciting. And as a consequence of the early success of this, the publishers have actually now asked me to pull together a series of books focused on critical studies of AI and education. So I'll be talking more about that in time as we go forward. Anyway, that's the context. But today's event is all about trying to begin the process of consolidating this widespread community of researchers doing really interesting things around the world. And the key is that, we all agree, I think, that we need to be taking a critical approach to these technologies and education. But that's where it stops because we're academics and we're going to disagree about the detail. And that's the fascinating thing about building this network. So the idea is to pull everyone together and to build a foundation for collaboration between us, but also to raise the level of our collective voice because decisions are being made around the world today and before today about AI and education And typically they do not seek out our voice. And I think they're crazy for not seeking out critical voices, but I also think it's our fault for not being vocal enough. So this is our attempt to raise our collective profile so that hopefully going forward, decisions are made, taking into account some critical perspectives. And one call out here, the Council of Europe is unusual in that it welcomes critical voices. We don't always win the discussions, but they do listen, which I think is really important and much appreciated. Anyway, all of this about what's going on and about raising the issue, etc., is segues neatly to our key speaker today. The point is, as you all will know by now, I'm sure, is that Pope Leo XIV published his encyclical last month. And from my perspective, it's really the only global level approach to AI that's taken anything near a human rights, social justice, or ethical critical approach, which I think is why it's so important. So I'm really very much looking forward to Dr. Gové's talk, in which he's going to guide us through and raise some interesting questions. But before I do introduce him, I just wanted to mention where we met, because I was invited to give a talk for the Maltese Ministry of Education at an event all about ethics, AI, and education. And over lunch, we started chatting, and I was fascinated by everything that he described and shared with me. And that's why I thought that this would be an amazing opportunity. So I'm really delighted and grateful that he's kindly agreed to give us today's talk. So very briefly, Dr. Jean Gové, he's a lecturer at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, having received his PhD in analytical philosophy from the UK, University of St Andrews up in Scotland. His research examines the philosophical foundations of AI systems, AI mediated manipulation, and the societal implications of emerging technologies. So you can see the amazing connections here. But he's also at the center of many international discussions around AI. For example, he's a member of the EU's AI scientific panel. He also serves as the Holy See's delegate on the steering committee for the New and Emergent Technologies Committee at the Council of Europe. So the New and Emergent Technologies group is what used to be called the Committee on AI and has now been developed further. But it doesn't stop there. He also coordinates the European AI Research Group within the Vatican's, I can't say this word, Dicastery for Culture and Education. My apologies. He's also served on Malta's Government Technical Committee for Social Media Reform and as the diocesan, again, I can't pronounce that. It's a word, it's a difficult word, coordinator for AI at the Archdiocese of Malta, where he's involved in the design and leading AI literacy work and ethics work for educators, parents, professionals, vulnerable. So this is so central to everything we've been talking about. Anyway, as I say, I am delighted and very grateful that Dr. Gové has agreed to be with us today. And Dr. Gové, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hi, thanks, Professor Holmes, as well, for the invitation. I'll just share my screen very quickly. You hyped me up quite a bit, so I have to, make sure I deliver now. I thought of doing this in a few different ways. I kind of assumed and thought that a lot of you will be coming from different walks of life, and maybe I think, or at least I decided that the best way to do this would be to spend quite a bit of time in setting the stage, and maybe less time in the actual content. And I do that on purpose because I think the more we do the groundwork in setting the stage on maybe certain contexts, preliminaries on kind of the viewpoint that Pope Leo was talking about, it helps us understand kind of the critical eye, I suppose, as it emerges from the actual text that we're talking about. So I think, we'll get to it, and then maybe we can debate any questions or queries or reflections you might have as we go along. Of course, for those of you who are maybe more aware of what is going on within the Catholic sphere, or more acquainted with Catholic philosophy, Catholic theology, some of the initial setting the stage might be a bit obvious for you or clear, but I kind of wanted to go through that, at least for the benefit of all of us who are present here. Great. So, Magnifica Humanitas. Normally in the church, the Latin title comes from the first couple of words of the opening document. And in fact, the opening words are humanity created by God in all its grandeur. The actual title or subtitle is On Safeguarding the Human Person in the Time of AI. So this is Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical. So some things there. Pope Leo has been Pope for a little over a year. An encyclical is basically the highest sort of document a pope can write. These might take different forms, different topics, and I'll speak more about kind of the topic and the genre, if you will, of this particular encyclical, published last month, as Professor Holmes said. It's a bit on the hefty side. So it's about 80 pages long, A4 pages. It's over 40,000 words. So as far as encyclicals go, it's on the heavier side of documents. So not maybe a bedtime read, I suppose. I should emphasize, and this might be obvious, it is inherently a theological document. It is aimed for the public, but it kind of assumes, of course, a certain kind of basis of theological awareness or theological framework. And that's kind of what I want at least to present to you in order to, I hope, better understand what the rest of the document is trying to actually say. The presentation will have two movements, as I kind of show over here. I'll just zoom out. So I'll try to show where the encyclical fits in within the wider kind of reality of Pope Leo as a pope, within the wider, what I'm calling the AI canon, within the church, the Catholic Church, and then within, more importantly, maybe for us, within what we term within Catholic theology as Catholic social teaching. So this will help us kind of situate the document even better. And then we'll zoom in, right? So we'll zoom in into the actual document. So MH there, of course, will be the abbreviation for the encyclical. And zooming in into certain central themes and foundational premises of the document. And then where education comes in, right? So the actual thing we want to discuss. So great, let's begin. So Pope Leo, I think I should apologize beforehand as well for something that we'll see as we go along. I have used too many quotes. And again, I've done this because, as Professor Holmes mentioned, the text is beautiful. I might be a bit biased in thinking that, but the text is beautiful. And I put there, I'm not going to read everything. You might want to take note of the citation and read it for yourself in the document at your leisure more quietly. So even though you might see slides just full of text, I'll pick out a line or two, which I think are more important. Yes, but again, I thought it might be best to just leave the whole quote there. Very good. So as I said, the encyclical is Pope Leo's first encyclical, first actually kind of solid document. He's written a number of messages and addresses over the course of this past year, but this is something, on another scale. It should be noted that Pope Leo made AI a priority from day one of becoming Pope. So 3 or 4 days after becoming Pope, he had a meeting with all the cardinals who elected him. This was streamed live. It was in the Sistine Chapel. And he was kind of giving a reason, or one of the reasons why he chose Leo, right? So the last Pope Leo was Pope Leo XIII, of course, in the late 1800s, 1890s, more or less. And something I'll mention later on in the presentation, Pope Leo XIII, right? So the one in the 1800s, is known for a number of things, most notably the person who wrote a particular encyclical called Rerum Novarum on the new things at the time when the world was passing through the Industrial Revolution. So that document is kind of the landmark document of the beginning of what we call Catholic social teaching. So it addresses workers' rights. It addresses the inhumane and unjust working conditions that workers had to face in factories. It talks about it's the incipit, if you will, the beginning of what would then develop to become the kind of corpus and principles of Catholic social teaching, which I'll talk about. And this is a little blurb from Pope Leo's speech to the cardinals in May of last year when he was elected. I chose to take the name Leo XIV. There are different reasons for this, but mainly because of Pope Leo XIII. in his historic encyclical, addressed the social question in the context of the first great industrial revolution. In our own day, the Church offers everyone the treasure of her social teaching in response to another social revolution, this time related to AI. I apologize for that. Very good. There is one other document that Pope Leo has published, which I think bears mentioning, right? And this is, where are we? Here. And this is a message that Pope Leo published for World Social Communications Day. This message was published on 24 January, if I'm not mistaken. And the subtitle of that document was Preserving Human Voices and Faces. It discusses AI within the wider reality of deep fakes, of manipulation on social media. Those are some of the subtitles there, just to give you an idea. Do not renounce your ability to think. Do not renounce your ability to feel. And then he speaks of a possible alliance he's referring to educators, policymakers, parents, families, different civic entities working together, and proposes those three criteria, values: responsibility, cooperation, and education. It's a long quote, don't worry. But I think, this is once again not from the encyclical, but from this message for World Social Communications Day. He says, education aims to do precisely this, to increase our personal ability to think critically, evaluate whether our sources are trustworthy, and the possible interests behind selecting the information we have access to understand the psychological mechanisms involved, and to enable our families, communities, and associations to develop practical criteria for a healthier and more responsible culture of communication. For this reason, it is increasingly urgent to introduce media, information, and AI literacy into education systems at all levels, reaching also to older adults and marginalized members of society who often feel excluded and powerless in the face of rapid technological change. He carries on there, of course, but I think you get a gist of what he's saying. That is Pope Leo and AI, right? But we can zoom out a little bit more and look at the wider work of the Catholic Church, as so the Holy See, the Vatican, pertaining to AI. I kind of joke that normally the Catholic Church is always 20 years late to a novelty or a new issue. We can't say the same for AI. So the very first document which really tackled AI head-on was in February 2020. It's the first document you can see over there, called the Rome Call for AI Ethics. And the idea of that document was the Catholic Church was saying that there's no legislation at the time, and we can argue almost still there isn't that much regulation. So the Rome Call is basically an appeal for governments, large institutions, businesses, to at least adhere to some level of ethical criteria. So it was kind of the initial foray of the Catholic Church within this field. I think it was initially signed by Microsoft, IBM, and some entities of the United Nations, along with the Italian government. Yes, so there are some other documents there, even by Pope Francis. Antiqua et Nova was the largest kind of massive document before this encyclical in 2024. Pope Francis was the very first pope to speak at a G7 event, which was, I think, 2 summers ago now in Italy. And that address was also aimed on AI and kind of the realities or challenges that the world is facing pertaining to AI. There are other entities and bodies, as well as universities and pontifical institutions that work on AI. As Professor Holmes mentioned, I work within the Dicastery, which is kind of a fancy way of saying ministry. We love our fancy words in the Catholic Church. Dicastery for Culture and Education. Those are maybe a few publications you might want to see that are coming out. So, for example, the last one, Sign of the Times, AI in Catholic Social Teaching, is a book I'm co-editing as part of the European AI Research Group. Hopefully that will be published sometime around autumn. So we've just finished proofreading it now, and it's heading off to the editors. So hopefully you can also see that when it comes out in a few months. Right. So let's zoom out a bit more. And situate Magnifica Humanitas within the wider body of Catholic social teaching. So I'll speak about what Catholic social teaching is in more detail in the next slide or two. I mentioned Pope Leo XIII in the 1890s, publishing this other encyclical called Rerum Novarum, on the new things. This was a landmark document. And in fact, subsequent documents by the popes, right? So popes would write encyclicals about anything, but a subsection of issues would be social issues pertaining to politics, society, social justice, work, labor, and the economy. This is kind of the wider umbrella, if you will, of Catholic social teaching. Those are a few, they're not all. There are a few of the documents published by different popes along the years. I think maybe I should also apologize. Maybe the text is a bit too small, depending on your screens. But anyway, I'll read a few of them. So, Quadragesimo Anno, Pius XI, the principle of subsidiarity is developed there. Pacem in Terris, Popolorum Progressio, Laborum Exercens, Solicitudo Rei Socialis, and Laudato Si Fratelli Tutti, the latter two by Pope Francis. Again, a few subtitles there just to kind of show you what they try to talk about. Normally, these social encyclicals aren't trying to change matters of doctrine. They aren't trying to talk about maybe more, let's talk, I don't know, maybe more moral issues. Everything is a bit moral if we think about it, but trying to address these societal concerns, the societal reality. So these social encyclicals focus on the intersection, once again, between politics, society, justice, work, marginalized groups, the environment. For example, Laudato Si really hones in on the environment in different areas. So again, giving you a little bit of an idea of where Magnifica Humanitas sits within this long lineage of social encyclicals discussing kind of Catholic social thought. Right. So maybe a question you might be asking is, what is Catholic social teaching, right? So again, not really sure where you come from or what your acquaintance is with the Catholic Church or with religion in general. The Church as a religious institution, the Catholic Church as a religious institution, is concerned with salvation. This would be the technical term, right? But normally we think of salvation as, what happens after you die, right? Of course, there are different theological underpinnings to this. Why are we created? The philosophical, theological questions of why does the world exist? Does God exist? And all these different things. However, in a sense, the implications trickle down to every aspect of life, right? And precisely, this is what Catholic social teaching is, right? So CST, which is the acronym for that, are the moral principles that derive from the wider corpus of Catholic social teaching, Catholic teaching in general, sorry, which are relevant and applicable to social life, right? We normally group these in a set of principles. These are almost all of them. Human dignity being the most important one, and the common good being the second most important one. I'll delve into these in a little bit. These are some other principles: the universal destination of goods, subsidiarity, solidarity, democracy, truth and justice, social justice pertaining to work, economy, and politics. So I'll open these up a bit more as we go along, but human dignity ultimately pertains to the inherent value that, once again, the Church believes that each and every human being has, regardless of where they are, their abilities, their aptitudes, their knowledge, their financial picture, anything pertaining to the sort. Common good. What is the common good? Common good is not goods in common, as used to be taught to us, at least at university. By the common good, we understand, or the principle is understood within the Catholic Church as, what are those minimal conditions needed in society in order to enable all individuals to flourish, right? I'll get to flourishing again in a few slides. So the common good is the minimal conditions needed in society in order to remove any obstacles that hinder an individual from flourishing, right, within that society. The universal destination of goods. What are those goods that we all have a right to? Maybe a spoiler alert later on. In Magnifica Humanitas, truth is construed as a moral good. So truth is a good. The Pope kind of construed. Normally, the universal destination of goods kind of discussed water, for example, or land. So normally, as this principle was articulated throughout the years, this pertained to physical goods. It's interesting, Pope Leo now is turning to moral goods, as we all have a right to these, and it's not good that a few control these goods and maybe restrict them to the rest of the people, right? Subsidiarity, again, maybe a bit of a not a familiar concept to all, possibly. So subsidiarity, again, very briefly put, and I apologize because I'm painting with a broad brush here, right? Subsidiarity basically entails that decisions that affect a group of people should be taken as close as possible to that group of people. So decisions that affect people on a local level should be taken as much as possible on a local level, right? Decisions that affect people on a national level should be taken on national level. In a sense, this principle has two different implications or consequences. One, it respects the agency of all, right? So if I'm a parent, in a sense, the education of my children should be first and foremost my decision, not the decision of the state, in a sense, right? That is a more local, so to speak, decision. At the same time, the principle of subsidiarity also recognizes that different groupings and hierarchies in society have to have the responsibility to contribute towards the well-being of the whole society, right? So looking after my country is not just the problem of my government, but it's also my problem, right? It's also a problem of the local council. It's also a problem of our school, right? We all have to contribute in order to we all have to contribute towards the betterment, the flourishing of the whole society in which we live in. Solidarity, democracy, truth, justice. I think these we're more acquainted with in general. Exactly. Yeah. So that is, once again, very briefly, right, what we understand by Catholic social teaching. Great. So that was out of setting the stage on the zooming out front. We can now zoom in. Of course, even here, I want to maybe tease out some of the implied concepts or premises that Pope Leo is working with. And again, of course, the Pope and the wider Catholic world, I suppose, take these as implicit or understood or take them for granted. There's kind of theological reasoning to argue for this. Of course, it's not really, it would be besides the point for us to argue for them. Do you agree with this or not? I suppose I just want to present that this is the framework with which the Pope is working with. And this is why, therefore, he's saying what he's saying. Appreciating what Professor Holmes said, we might agree on the overarching picture, but we might disagree with the details. I think maybe here we might disagree with the foundational ontology, but we might agree with kind of what are the practical assertions that the Pope might be making. Maybe something else I should also mention before I actually proceed is an encyclical in general, including this one, is not intended to be a policy document. So I'm not sure what you're expecting or what you've read, but it is not the job of the Pope, and he makes it very clear, of any Pope, but he makes it very clear that this is not his duty to kind of give minute, detailed policy proposals of what people, right, should do or not do, what government should do or should not do. The aim of the encyclical is to give kind of a sense of direction, a sense of a thrust towards one direction or another, or a flavor, if you will, right? One of the reasons why there aren't maybe very, very, very detailed policy points or proposals is precisely because the Pope is writing in Rome, and this document is being read all around the world, and the reality all around the world is quite different, right? So I think one of the reasons is precisely to give maybe a direction, and how those directions are incarnated in the various realities around the world and the various kind of pictures or societies will be the work of different people, arguably also the work of all of us present here. Very good. So these are what I think I thought of might be the 7 main foundational premises that Pope Leo is working with, right? I also think these are also, in a sense, themes as well. There are some themes I'll get to in the following slides. I have long quotes for each of these 7, which I think I'll just jump, and then I'm happy to share the presentation with you, and you can then read them at your own leisure. So I think it might be easier if I explain each one in a bit of detail, and then I'll speed through the quotes themselves, right? So the first 3 are the crucial ones. Because in a sense, we understand that the document is not a document on AI. The encyclical is not a document on AI. The document, the encyclical, speaks on human beings in the time of AI, right? So in a sense, what Pope Leo does, again, and we're moving into the document here, what Pope Leo does is frame the reality of AI not as a technological problem, but frames it as a human problem and, relatedly, a political problem, right? Now, technological issues and technological problems and challenges emerge and are there. But primarily, essentially, this is a human problem, right? Or a problem we should tackle from this human point of view. And this is why he begins by stating kind of crucial facts about humanity as opposed to about AI, right? So, number one, as I mentioned some minutes ago, the inherent dignity of all human persons. And this is crucial, the inherent dignity of all human persons, right? Now, this might be obvious for maybe all of us here, or not, or almost all of us. In different elements of the encyclical, the Pope addresses points related to transhumanism and post-humanism. So I'm sure a lot of you would be acquainted with these realities. In a sense, the Pope is pointing at the underlying metaphysical frameworks, if you will, that a lot of people in tech, a lot of the powerful people in tech are operating with, right? The idea that humanity is a problem to be solved. We should be engineered to be more efficient, to be more sufficient. Our perfection is something we can scientifically engineer, scientifically arrive at, right? Using more technology. I'm thinking here of viewpoints expressed by the likes of Nick Bostrom, for example, right? Just to mention one example, or Ray Kurzweil, right? So these would be the how would we call these people? The academic figureheads, I suppose, that move forward. Yes, this kind of anthropological framework, right? Humanity is a problem to be solved, and the Pope basically is saying, no, this is not the case, right? Humanity, right? We have our own problems, weaknesses, fragilities. We are, if you will, inefficient. And he grudgingly uses the word, but he kind of says, look, it's already problematic to speak of humanity as inefficient, right? In a sense, our limitations should be viewed in a positive sense. Right. So I repeat that our limitations should be viewed in a positive sense, right? In a sense, and this is part of it is our dignity. But also, he draws an interesting point, which is that a lot of the beauty of our humanity arises precisely out of our limitations. So, for example, there's a bit of an astonishing point that the Pope says at one point, which says, if we were to eliminate suffering completely, we would also, by extension, eliminate love and compassion. And since we show love and compassion with those who are suffering. Now, suffering can be understood here in a very wide sense, but what he's getting at is that the limitations that we experience, in a sense, are ways in which we also show ourselves to be noble, to be good, to share in the plight of those who are more in need, to vouch for those who are suffering injustices, right? Of course, this is in no way, shape, or form an appeal to anti-science or to not using technology to better our lives and society. But again, he's pointing against this medicinal, if you will, idea of humanity as a problem to be solved. And related to this inherent dignity of all, regardless of who you are or where you're from, we are therefore, the second point, all called to flourish, right? This is something the Pope calls integral human development. True flourishing. There's a beautiful quote here. There's a beautiful quote, which is not Pope Leo's, but Pope Paul VI in one of those other encyclicals. Paul VI writing, if I'm not mistaken, sometime in the 70s, in the mid-70s. Paul VI saying, true progress is only true progress if it benefits the whole person and all people. So I'll repeat that. True progress is only real progress if it benefits the whole person and all people. So the whole person here is that integral sense, right? So I need to advance not only economically, I need to advance intellectually, culturally, I need to advance emotionally, I need to advance psychologically, right? We grow in this holistic manner, not only on one metric and that metric of economy, right? So he kind of references these viewpoints arising from from the world of economy of people who are now trying to point towards well-being indexes. Now, that's a bit more of an economic discussion, which I'm not very familiar with. But again, this is a push to move away from the whole GDP idea of measuring the success of a society, which is just financial, just economic, right? Very good. So, inherent dignity of all of us are called to flourish. Becoming perfect, becoming holy, depending on how theological or not you want your language to be. The third point, which now we're becoming more social, I suppose, right? The flourishing of one individual cannot harm or impede the flourishing of another, right? Now, again, maybe obvious for a few of us or for a lot of us, but Bob is saying that out there, right? This pertains to the common good. We cannot say that there's true flourishing happening if, in order for me to flourish, I'm impinging on, I'm harming someone else, right? And here he makes reference to the new forms of slavery and the new forms of, if you will, digital colonialism that we're seeing in various aspects in the development of AI. The fourth point, I think, needs no explanation in this audience. The idea that technology is never neutral. I think, very quickly gloss over that I don't think you'd be in a critical studies network if you thought technology was neutral. But the fifth point, again, maybe comes from the fourth, which is this idea that tools are created with the moral vision of those creating them, right? Tools are created with the moral vision of those creating them. And here, again, he's hinting at the concentration of power, the great concentration of power that these AI companies have, right? Which leads us to the sixth. This was the most soundbitey, clickbaity phrase that lots of media houses took from the encyclical. The Pope repeated again and again, we need to disarm. We need to disarm AI. Now, I need to clarify something about this, right? So we need to disarm AI. On one level, he's talking about using AI in military contexts in warfare. That is something he approaches in chapter 5. But he makes it very clear. He says, I'm not talking just about that, right? What he's talking about disarming is primarily the narrative of competition, the narrative of race, right? This AI race. I spent about 2 weeks in the States in December, part of a delegation from the Holy See. And while there were some people who were very pro legislation, regulation, ethics of AI, and others very anti, what was across the board is this idea of race. Sure, we have to be ethical, but we have to be first against China. Like, okay, fine, okay, if you say so, right? So the idea of race, what the Pope is trying to say, the idea of a race, we're in a race, and therefore we have to be first, is the narrative of race kind of gives you leeway to say, well, we might break a few eggs along the, I'm paraphrasing, right? This is not the Pope's language. It kind of gives us this liberty to maybe trample on or harm a few people, right? Because we need to be first, right? That's the main goal. We'll try to be careful along the way, but the main priority is we need to be first. And he challenges this idea of race, of competition, both between private entities, right? That different private, we're seeing this play out. I mean, especially in the past couple of months, more than ever, I think, or it's reaching ahead. Both on level of companies, on a private level, right, between private entities, but also, as I've already mentioned, on level of governments, right? This idea of US and China, Europe is somewhere lost, like at the far back of this pack or whatever. We need to be first, we need to be first, we need to be first, right? So this is something he hints at. Well, he doesn't hint at it, he's very explicit in this. And the last point, just to have a bit of hope, right? And I do want to emphasize that the encyclical is quite hopeful in tone, right? The Pope repeats again and again and again, this is not a fait accompli, right? All of us have to play our part. If you're a parent, I was going to say a simple parent in the sense, if your only power and influence is over your own children, if you run a school or you're an educator, if you're a policymaker, if you're an academic, whatever your role is in society, we all have a shared, and I think there are 2 or 3 subtitles called shared responsibilities. This is, everyone has to play their part. This is not a problem for the United Nations to solve, and we just sit down, pretty, walking, talking, praying, if that's your thing, for something to happen. We all have a part to play in all of this. Great. So That's the long quote, Magnifica Humanitas 51, on the inherent dignity of all, right? The last line there, the value of persons, however, does not depend on what they achieve or produce. I think this is a very succinct way of talking about human dignity. Premises 2 and 3, right? All are called to flourish. I mentioned that quote from Pope Paul VI. Development is authentic only if it is integral, meaning it can foster the development of each person and of the whole person. And the point that flourishing of one cannot impede another, Magnifica Humanitas 83. For individuals as well as for nations, development is both a duty and a right. Minimum conditions are required for enabling every person, right? This idea that nobody should be left behind is repeated again and again and again. Very good. Technology is never neutral. Once again, I think, in fact, there's a quote here that I think a lot of you would enjoy. If a system is designed or used in a way that treats some lives as less worthy or excludes them without the possibility of appeal, then it is not merely a tool to be used well, right? This morning I was about 150 nurses, giving them training, and this, the question always pops, well, as long as you use it properly. Well, there's a deeper problem here, right? That's from paragraph 104. The moral vision of those creating these tools, right? A more moral AI is not enough if that morality is determined by a few, right? What is needed is a more active political involvement. He's being very clear here, at least in the direction we need to go at. The need to disarm. To disarm means discrediting the assumption that technical power automatically confers the right to govern. That's fantastic. To disarm means discrediting the assumption that technical power automatically confers the right to govern. To disarm does not mean rejecting technology, but preventing it from dominating humanity. And premise 7, which is this idea that the part of history is not kind of set in stone. This is from towards the end of the document. I think a lot of you might enjoy this, or some of you maybe, if there are any Lord of the Rings fans. This is the first documented time that the Pope has actually, that a Pope has quoted Gandalf, right? So that's a quote in the second paragraph. So this is Tolkien, right? Well, Gandalf talking through, well, you know what I mean. It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. The civilization of love will not. So he has this whole dichotomy between civilization of power and civilization of love. Will not arise from a single or spectacular gesture, now the Pope is saying, but from the sum total of small and steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. For this reason, it is worthwhile pausing to reflect on some aspects how we, each in our own way, can cooperate in building the civilization of love. He carries on then towards the last part of the document. Very good. So, central themes in Magnifica Humanitas: the grant of humanity, reinterpreting our limitations. I spoke about that. There's a critique of the technocratic paradigm. I didn't mention that, but it's very similar to the whole transhumanist, posthumanist idea. The idea that we should interpret people and problems in terms of efficiency and data. Education and work, I'll get into that. The concentration of power and wealth, novel forms of slavery, colonialism, mentioned that. War, breakdown of multilateralism, chapter 5. Truth and democracy, chapter 4, which I'll go into. There is this dichotomy throughout the whole document between building the Tower of Babel or building the walls of Jerusalem. He's taking two biblical images there. The second one from Nehemiah. Or, in our maybe more modern terms, cultivating a civilization of power or a civilization of love. Where does education fit in, right? Chapter 4. Those are the subtitles and subtitles of chapter 4. I wanted to show you where education fits in. Truth as a common good, truth and democracy, communication and the collective imagination, towards an ecology of communication, fantastic sub area. And then those two sections, an education alliance for the digital age and the central roles of schools. So I'll now zoom into a few paragraphs there and conclude. Right, he goes on for work and talking about work and slavery. So education is within the wider area of truth, as you just saw, right? So, and the Pope understands truth as this relational endeavor, something that we achieve by working together, by communicating, by trying to understand each other's perspective. There's a fantastic quote that came to mind as I was preparing this by Bernard Lonergan, the Canadian Jesuit. Objectivity is the result of authentic subjectivity. It's only in the authentic meeting of one and the other that we can achieve the truth, that we can arrive at the truth. Truth as being necessary for democracy and the building of the common good. Those who control digital platforms and tools have the power to manipulate and influence people. That is to say, influence them away from the truth and according to their views. This is something that the Pope hints at as he's building up this argument. Therefore, something maybe a bit obvious for all of us here, the field of education assumes decisive importance. 139. And he critiques the attention economy, social media, and their effects, especially on the young. Here he speaks on education, again, number 140, if you want to read it at your leisure. But I think there's one line here which I've made in bold. Educating people about the use of AI then involves teaching them to decide when and for what purpose it ought not to be used. Right? So I know a lot of you might be clapping at that phrase. I know Professor Holmes is definitely clapping at that phrase, right? Teaching them to decide when and for what purpose it ought not to be used, right? He goes on to talk about, he mentions Plato as well, but I think Tolkien is a bit more amazing than Plato, in the sense, for a pope to quote, that's what I mean. The central role of schools. School is the place where new generations can learn to seek and love the truth, to reflect on the meaning of life, and to recognize the dignity of every person. For this reason, many parents want their children to grow in the capacity to form relationships, develop critical thinking skills, and appraise solid values, place great expectations on schools as valuable partners in their children's education. He carries on, schools are not called to follow the pace of the digital world, but to offer that which the digital sphere by itself cannot provide, namely a shared time for learning and developing trustworthy relationships. Let me highlight something that at times causes controversy, and I think I might be controversial with you. One word that the Pope does not mention is syllabi. The Pope does not mention syllabi. Syllabus, nothing, right? Does he mention curriculum? He mentions literacy training, as I showed you in other documents, but I want to highlight this because, in a sense, school is, within this idea, right, a place of forming a human being, right, as opposed to following a set curriculum. Now, I would venture to guess that a lot of you here would be in agreement with me on this, or, well, at least with the Pope, not with me. But I think we need to understand this, that in a sense, we need to cultivate the atmosphere, the environment of school. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the following quote, yes, so he presents here three challenges for schools, socio-political, pedagogical, intellectual. The socio-political is quite obvious. Both within individual nations and across different regions of the world, there are significant inequalities when it comes to access to basic education and higher studies. I think this is quite clear and self-explanatory. There is a pedagogical challenge. Many educational systems struggle to keep pace with change. The advance of AI is rapidly rendering curricula obsolete. Well, he does mention curricula, not syllabi, so I apologize there. So I think this is quite an interesting sentence here. The organization of schools, physical spaces, evaluation methods, and the role of teachers must be rethought. I think we can get behind the role of teachers and evaluation methods, but the fact that Pope is also talking about physical spaces needing to be rethought, right? How is the actual structure of a school conducive to building up relationships, right? Building up the holistic human person, building up an individual who can be an integral and flourishing member of society. I stay away from a functioning member of society because that gives quite a bit of a mechanistic idea. Again, if school is preparing you for work, you are another cog in the wheel. But school should be preparing you for this humanistic, this holistic, this relational formation, right? To flourish, to grow. The third challenge for schools is intellectual. An incessant flow of information replaces the essential exercise of research, reflection, and discernment. A genuinely healthy attitude is needed, requiring rhythms that incorporate silence, in-depth study, reading, and judicious analysis, for without these elements, inner freedom may be compromised. School should be a place where we learn how to use our freedom. Right. So if I can digress a little bit, and I'll conclude in the next few minutes. If I can digress a little bit, I spoke about the dignity that all human beings have, at least within this kind of Catholic understanding. Part of that dignity is the freedom, the agency we have, right? And we use that freedom, that agency in different ways, some in good and some in bad. Within the Catholic kind of scholastic idea, we have three levels of freedom, right? One is I'm freedom from, right? So I'm not in prison. I'm not in prison. I'm not shackled, restrained, right? I'm free to move in society. The other second level of freedom is I'm free to do whatever I want. And this is normally where the level of freedom people stop at. Kind of this Catholic idea, Catholic anthropology presents a third level of freedom, which is a freedom for excellence, a freedom for perfection, right? So in a sense, the exercise of freedom is only a good exercise of freedom if it makes us more free. I think you can maybe an image here that might help you is the image of maybe someone who's an addict, right? I make free choices, but those free choices lead me down an addiction and I lose my freedom. Whereas the good use of freedom should lead me to become more free, ergo, should lead me to become more human, right? So in a sense, this is what school education should give, right? This proper understanding of how do I use my freedom, how do I form myself to grow within this narrative of flourishing. Work is one element of that flourishing, right? And the Pope goes on to speak about the dignity of work. And work should not just be there for sustenance, for financial sustenance, but work should give dignity to those who do that work, right? But work is only one part of the flourishing of human beings. And schools should teach us, well, the younger generation, well, all of us, I hope, towards this flourishing, this holistic flourishing, this integral human development. I think this is the final conclusion from Magnifica Humanitas 238. So I'll conclude with this quote. He has three or four exhortations. Let us build relationships. Let us observe the truth. And one of them is let us invest in education, beginning with ourselves. I skip a bit there. In a particular way, we need adults to rediscover their vocation as artisans of education, prepared to work patiently each day with the support of extensive and shared educational partnerships, maybe like this network, right? Today, accompanying children and young people in using technology for developing responsible relationships, helping them to recognize the risks and choose what fosters inner freedom, what I was talking about, is a concrete form of charity and will safeguard their dignity, teaching new generations that technological evolution does not follow a predetermined path, but can be guided by personal and collective responsibility, constitutes one of the most valuable services to the common good, which is, in a sense, I hope, what we are all, as well, individually and maybe as a group, trying to do. I'm very happy now to carry this on with questions and reflections that we might have.
Thank you so much. Can I invite people to give their thanks to Dr. Gové in the usual Zoom way? That was terrific. Really very, very good, really interesting, very well explained, and raised so many important and interesting issues. And I'm just going to quickly quote somebody in the chat. Who has said, and I'm not naming them only because I don't want to. I mean, I suppose they've named themselves already, so I can't pronounce it. Is it Maka Eradzi? I apologize. Anyway, they say, stunned by the depth and simultaneous practicality, the Pope is being more progressive than politicians, understanding the aim of education and the pedagogical challenges better than many professionals. So I think, from our this is really interesting. One of the things that we've been working, many of us on this call today have been working in the space for a long time. And more than once, somebody has said to me, did the Pope contact you? Because a lot of what he said is similar to the kind of things you've been talking about. So that was, for me, very, very pleasurable. We have a bunch of questions, Dr. Gové. So if I may, I'm just going to invite people to put their mics on and ask you directly rather than me. So I'm going to start with Helen Beetham, who has been involved in the world of education and technology and other such things for a long time. So Helen, are you there? Would you like to ask your question?
Oh, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I've not put my camera on because, like many of us, I'm a sweaty mess with the heating planet today.
No, right, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful insights from the encyclical and from today. It's really, really grateful. I guess my question, which a lot of us have been kind of asking, is where do we ground our morality, whether it's a Catholic morality or another morality, when the idea of human flourishing apparently can no longer be taken as normative or taken for granted, when the industry we're talking about has very much other ends in mind than human flourishing as the kind of purpose of development, whether it's technical or political or any other sort. How can we reground human flourishing?
Fantastic. A difficult problem, a difficult question, a difficult problem. I think the Pope maybe slightly hints at that in the encyclical. He goes at lengths to mention the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the whole concept of human rights. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the second chapter, I've got it here. Yes, second or third chapter. And he kind of says something. I mean, sure, especially in pluralistic contexts and settings, and global settings being themselves pluralistic. When we're not starting from the same maybe worldview or ontology, it's maybe difficult to kind of argue for the sense of flourishing. But in a sense, what the Pope says is, when I'm being a bit reductive here, right? When we kind of agreed on the human rights declarations, these are the human rights. The Pope is kind of saying they are forceful, they have force, they carry weight, not simply because we agreed to them, we signed them, but in a sense because despite the varying worldviews, metaphysical worldviews that we come from, and we might still, academically argue which one is more maybe accurate, but in a sense, despite this, these human rights point at something of the truth, right? So we might maybe disagree on what is the source of the dignity of all human beings, right? Is it something divine? Is it not something divine? And we might, want to debate that. But the fact that we have a certain inalienable dignity, in a sense, would still be true, even if we might not agree exactly on the origin of that claim. So maybe despite our inability to maybe agree on one common worldview, this need not impede us, I would imagine the Pope saying, this need not impede us from kind of arguing for human flourishing, or for the need of human flourishing, or an integral understanding of human flourishing. So I think we can still argue for that, despite not having kind of the common worldview that we might come from or all share. I'm not sure if that might have answered the question adequately.
Thank you.
I think this is a debate that can go on and on, but we've got Helen, we've got lots more questions, so I'm going to move on if I may. But Jean, I'm going to ask you one that might be more challenging now. I didn't offer you a completely free ride. So this question, the person has that they present themselves as anonymous, so we don't know who this is. But anyway, I will read the question for you. As an AI critic and a Catholic, I was very excited to see this encyclical, an extension of the logic of Pope Francis's Antiqua et Nova. The encyclical, however, was unfortunately repeatedly framed by the media as in partnership with Anthropic. Can you speak to that choice?
Yes.
Thank you.
I should, so I thought this was going to come at some point. I should mention a few things on the outset. I had no part to play in the writing of the encyclical. I also had no part to play in the presentation of the encyclical. So what the question is referring to, just to give a bit of a background for the rest of us, the Pope signed the encyclical on the 15th of May, which is the 135th anniversary of the signing of Rerum Novarum in 1891. But the encyclical was presented to the public on the 25th of May. Normally, these presentations, the Pope, whoever the Pope is not present for them, but Pope Leo decided to be present for them. And normally there's a panel of individuals who speak during the presentation of the encyclical, whatever it is. This time around, there were two or three. There was Professor Anna Rowlands from Durham University. There was Professor Lushombo from Boston, I want to say. I'm sorry. I think, yeah, Boston University. And there was also Chris Olah, who is one of the co-founders of Anthropic. Now, this caused quite a stir. both when it was announced that Chris Ola would be there and also following this. So first of all, the first thing I want to clarify is the document is the Pope's and only the Pope's. So Anthropic did not co-author or even though there was some discussion online whether the Pope used Claude to write the encyclical, but anyway. But there is this kind of debate of why was a co-founder of one of these powerful tech companies present there at the presentation of the encyclical. The Vatican has said the following. The Vatican has said that, in a sense, part of the people we need to get on board in changing this worldview are the people who are actually developing these tools. Now, so I would also think, and this is now my opinion, the Vatican was trying to extend the diplomatic arm in this, right? In having a partner, well, not partnership again, but kind of asking these companies to understand what the church is trying to say, and to therefore come on board and to allow for this collaboration to amend, arrange, modify, and move forward, right? To break away from this narrative of race and to move towards collaboration and true progress and prudence. This still caused a bit of a stir. Some people have said this is, I think the phrase was Vatican washing, kind of, right? So I disagree. I would initially, I'll be honest with you all, I was also somewhat skeptical of the optics, right? And we can argue on the optics of having a co-founder of a leading AI company present there for the presentation of the encyclical. If I invite you to listen to the speeches that were made, including the very short input that was given by Chris Ola, basically saying we have to understand as tech companies that we cannot solve these problems by ourselves, and we need intersectional input, right, to discuss the impact of these tools on humanity, on society, etc., etc. So in a sense, there was this openness to collaborate, or this openness from the side of these AI companies for this external collaboration. Now, obviously, in Italian, we say "tra il dire e il fare," right? Between it's one thing saying something and it's one thing actually, putting your money where your mouth is. But I think this was the aim of the Vatican having Chris Ola there as a kind of trying to rope in these companies to be participants around this table, because ultimately it is they who need to adapt, change, and also understand that there's certain harm coming from what they're doing. So I understand that the optics might still be slightly problematic. I want to clarify the document is just the Pope's. And yes, there is this maybe discussion on how should we go about this in a better way. In a sense, should we just shun these companies and say, burn or whatever? That might be one of the views. Or should we kind of try and bring them on board in order to amend and to use their technology for good, for genuine good? This remains an open debate, but I suppose I tried to give a bit of clarity to what happened there.
Thank you. I think you handled that incredibly well, so thank you for that. I'm going to call on John Domain. John, if you'd like to switch, you're there. I can see you now. If you'd like to ask a question, thank you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for this talk, John. I'm a professor of computer science at the Open University's Technology Institute. Been working on AI for education since the 80s. So been building tutors and educational systems. Lifelong atheist who's a big fan of Pope Leo. And I quote the encyclical every chance I get. So, in fact, I'm missing a technological meeting to be here and listen to you. I posted several questions, but just to be fair, I'll only ask one. So I understand the sentiment around transhumanism, but I don't think I fully understand it intellectually. So, and I was thinking the way to frame this. So imagine if we brought somebody back from 2000 years ago and brought them into society now, they might say we're all transhuman because we drive cars, we have these mobile phones, we sit on the internet, we have glasses, etc., and we have vaccines. So I'm wondering, what's the simplest way to explain the Pope's position on when somehow the view between how humanity uses technology doesn't align with his view? So
yeah, the one clarification there, and maybe that's for the others, is the Pope doesn't have a unique view here, right? So the Pope is kind of carrying on tradition. So there's a very good question. So the Pope's view and the wider Catholic view is definitely not anti-science or anti-technology, right? So just to get that out of the way. So if we can use vaccines to cure diseases, by all means, we should do that. If we can perform surgical interventions to, overcome illnesses, disease, or problems, by all means, right? If we can use technology to travel more, quickly, or so it is definitely not anti-technology or anti-science by no means whatsoever. I think maybe what the deeper problems with transhumanism, maybe, and posthumanism are, is this maybe implicit idea that every problem is a technological problem, maybe. If we can frame it that way, right? That may be a bit poetic, but obviously we need to unpack that a little bit, right? So in a sense, the problem of justice is not just because we don't have as yet the most perfect algorithm to make just decisions, right? These are human realities. The problem of poverty, I mean, we know on a technical level we have enough food and right, to feed everyone. This is more of a political issue, right? This is a human problem. So in a sense, this is the idea that every problem is a technological problem, which is not the case. And the second, therefore, that humanity is seen as, once again, as well, a technical problem in and of itself, right? So this idea that so these two, we need to hold these two things maybe a bit in tension. We can use medicines to overcome, and today I'm taking medicine as well, right? But at the same time, the idea is not, you are a machine to be optimized, right? In a sense, it is to some degree an acceptance of certain limitations that humanity has, and it's okay. Right now, if we can push the boundary of those limitations using science and technology, all well and good, fantastic, amazing, right? But in a sense, maybe it's also the inner attitude of maybe the what's the word I should use here? The anxious running away from our limitations, right? I think that is maybe at the deeper root of transhumanism there. So I hope maybe that might have clarified that a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to friend and colleague Karen Lockhead. Karen, over to you.
Hi, Jean. Fascinating, fascinating talk. Thank you so much. And I really liked the way you contextualize the encyclical within the body of other encyclicals. So thank you very much for that. My question is, I really appreciate the way that there's a centering of humanity, humanity first within an age of AI rather than AI and how does humanity fit in. But it does seem to come at the cost of or decentering the environment, which seems to be important, if not essential, to any understanding of flourishing. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that, the sort of centering of humanity and decentering of the environment.
Okay. So I would say, I think maybe to couch what I'm going to say, in a sense, maybe there's this decentering in the emphasis the Pope gives, because on level of framework, this is not the case, and I'll open that up a little bit more. So something that kind of was really heavily opened by Pope Francis, right, previous Pope, is this idea of integral ecology. Everything is connected, right? So environmental problems are societal problems, are political problems, right? Everything is, maybe this sounds a bit kind of cliche, but everything is connected, right? This idea of integral ecology, which Pope Francis really went on and on and on about it. And I say this in a good way, not in a bad way. And Pope Leo is carrying on in this vein, right? So, for example, in points where he mentions these novel forms of slavery, he references individuals, communities, societies in less affluent places where either being asked to perform jobs for rubbish salaries, but also the exploitation that is happening there in terms of mining, in terms of also, once again, the environment and these realities. So I think maybe, yes, I would concede there is a critique to be made that the Pope could have maybe foregrounded the discussion on the environment a bit more. But I wouldn't say it's entirely just to say that he has disregarded this or turned away. In a sense, there is a primacy of the human being within the environment that we are in, right? So looking after the environment is in order to serve humanity in this sense. But again, part of this wider understanding of flourishing, integral flourishing, which is part of the environment we are in. So yes, I suppose there could have been maybe, or you can argue that even though he has said things more explicitly about the environment in other addresses outside of the encyclical. But yes, I think that would be maybe a fair critique to advance towards the document, that maybe the environment per se, as a single issue in the sense, as we're talking, could have been more foregrounded. But I think it is implicitly there within this whole idea of integral ecology that the Pope references once or twice, well, more than once or twice, throughout the document, again, carrying on in the vein of Pope Francis.
Thanks so much, Jean.
Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to, and apologies for mispronouncing it, Luke Turbeek. Luke, where are you? Are you here?
I'm here.
There you are,
Thank you
Luke.
so
Thank you.
much, Wayne. Good to see you once again. And of course, first of all, congratulations with the wonderful book. I'm happy to have the hard copy over here. The critical studies of AI in education. Well, it's a really interesting piece of work, so I'm very impressed by it and very useful also for me. Working as an educational advisor and researcher for VU Amsterdam and a national research program on AI and data literacy. John, thank you so much for your wonderful explanation of the work of the Pope. My question about this, I'm going to look for it, well, because I have a lot of things on the screen right now. Let me double check if I have the correct one. Oh yeah, I read in this in the document that education is a long journey that requires patience, and of course we are fully. I can imagine something when I think about it, and that is why time is needed for development and for coming into contact with the reality behind appearance as well. That's very true, I guess. And I was wondering, from your perspective, Jean, how can we best use that necessary time from the perspective of critical studies on AI and education, giving the essence of MH? What should we, as a new network, identify from your perspective as our top priority?
That's a very good question, which I think I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that in the sense because I'm not the expert in that field, right? But I think to be once again a little bit cliche and reductivist, the best defense is offense. So in a sense, I think anything that can bring to the fore, once again, human formation, right? Or education that is humane in this sense, right? If you're getting what I'm saying. I was preparing some presentations for schools here as we're preparing our AI framework, right? So kind of what not to do, what is permissible, not permissible. And I was preparing, I thought, I'll be a bit classical and went to Aristotle. And it was interesting that his idea of scholia, right, is this kind of place of leisure. And ascholia, right, the opposite, is actually the condition of the slave. And it's amazing when I said something like that to the educators present there, they were almost shocked at the simplicity, but also the ramifications, right? So in a sense, something that we've lost in our culture is the concept of leisure. People like Piper would say that it's only in true moments of leisure that we grow, that we learn, that we understand, that we form ourselves, an openness to God, if that is as well there, or at least to the transcendence or the divine. So I think anything that can bring to the fore the grandeur of our humanity, if you permit me, I think would be one way we could do this, right? And that is kind of showing what this should all be about. And once again, I'm proposing this human-centric view as opposed to this technocentric or technocratic paradigm that this Pope and previous popes have critiqued severely.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm now calling upon Dagmar. If you'd like to ask your question, please.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. My question would be, because it was one of the slides, who were, or one part of one of your comments, that, for example, professors or a representative from the educational system, but also companies who should be at the table, because this is the technology that they are developing. But the question would be, is there any plans to include also at the table those who are affected by such technologies? For example, data workers, parents of children died by suicide after using such tools, or educators who are forced to use AI technologies, even if when they see they bring nothing, maybe to some didactical or pedagogical tools, goals in the classroom. I suppose the Pope and what he represents will have any or some importance in a lot of different processes, conversations, and so on in the future, short-term future, maybe too. But what about those other people which are not included now in the dialogues? This comes from the top down, but the very down is very huge. And whether there is something related to including these people too would be very interesting to know. Thank you.
So if you're asking about whether the Holy See itself is creating these bodies, I would not have the total picture about that, but tendentially, kind of in the same spirit of the encyclical, different bodies of the Holy See kind of aim towards giving indications, and then it is up to the local or national churches to then integrate that, right, and put that into action. So I can speak about now maybe my reality in Malta, right? So in Malta, the church has a commission on integral human development, not specifically on AI, but discussing other issues. And it seeks, there's a panel of experts, so I'm on that panel. But whatever issue is being discussed, kind of one of the main things we try to do is we always ensure that we are kind of approaching this from a perspective from below, if you will, right? So part of it involves, for example, outside of this particular field in Malta, we have a number of issues with construction, property, the price of property, construction workers given horrible working conditions. So it is our duty as this kind of commission to engage with these different individuals and then to elevate their voices on, for example, a national level or policy level. So the Vatican itself is not giving kind of, I suppose, explicit instructions how to do this, but this idea of, so another principle within kind of the wider discussion of Catholic social thought is what is called the preferential option of the poor, right? The preferential option of the poor. So in all these situations, one of the attitudes of approaching any societal issue would be to understand who is here missing out, who is here being left out, who is here being marginalized, right? How should we, qua church, help them? But also how should we, qua church, voice, maybe higher up, if you will, right? The concerns and plights of those marginalized. And one of the exercises is, again, this contextualization of understanding who is the marginalized person here, right, in this context, issue, or reality.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious of all the work we put on Jean's shoulders. But I have one more question, if we may, and I'm now going to really embarrass myself with pronunciation, but I will do my best. Din Muhammad, are you there? Would you like to share your question?
Yes, I'm here. So I came late, sorry for that. But my question is, I think it's a great document that critically engaged with AI development, but however, how the Catholic Church will change the narratives about AI with diminished influence of religion in 21st century, and will it be sidelined in the era of quick videos and fast-changing dynamics? That was my question.
So I think I might challenge the premise of the question. I think as time progresses, and we're seeing some of this, especially in what we can call maybe the Western world, with the problems about that. But anyway, kind of this resurgence of religion or spirituality. It seems that within cultures where it seems younger generations are looking for a deeper sense of meaning, a deeper sense of understanding, sense of purpose, right? And not in all cases, but a number of cases, it seems religion, either organized religion or spirituality in a wider sense, might be answering that. There is, depending on which studies you see, seemingly an uptake in the practice of the Catholic faith with younger generations in Europe and North America. I should mention here, I think I'm duty bound to do so, that an element of this could potentially be slightly problematic if it is coupled with maybe far-right ideologies or things of this nature. So that's there. I don't think it would be just to say this is the only phenomenon at play, but there is this phenomenon at play, at least in a number of countries. At the same time, it seems to be the case that from what we can see, what the Pope is saying, and by extension, what at least the Central Catholic Church is saying at the Vatican, it seems to be heard. Now, how much it's acted upon might be another issue, right? But I won't say it's not being acted upon because it's coming from a religious institution. I would say it's just a question that, what the Pope is proposing doesn't really have a lot of economic benefit for a lot of the people in power. It actually might harm them. But I think I wouldn't entirely and totally dismiss what the Pope is saying, and by extension, what any other maybe major religion or faith might be saying about the field, just because it is coming from religion. It's not exactly what you're saying either, so I don't want to mischaracterize what you're saying. But in a sense, I think as people start to look more for something that gives meaning, reason, purpose, I think religious narratives, whichever they are, but predominantly those coming from, let us again crudely call organized religion, are, I think, still having a certain degree of weight, if not maybe becoming a bit more important or followed. So challenges still exist, but I wouldn't entirely agree maybe with kind of the problem as you're presenting it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, I'm conscious of time. So everybody on the call, please can you join me in thanking Dr. Jean Gové for a fascinating talk and a really clear exposition and for engaging with those questions, some of which were quite challenging. And, this is clearly a discussion we could continue for hours. I have a bunch of questions that I could have brought you. Many of them from my close colleagues and friends, so I apologize to them. We just didn't have enough time. But hopefully this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So Jean, for me, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So with regards the new network, we will be emailing you on an irregular basis. We will be setting up the website that we should all have these days. So that's Christian is looking after that for us. And we will be putting the recording of this event on the website so you can access it there. And John, you kindly said you would share your presentation, so we'll put it into a PDF and make that available as well. So so thank you ever so much, everybody. I hope those of you in Europe who are unexpectedly experiencing this ridiculous heat, that you all do well. And I really look forward to continuing to work with you all in the near future and to build this collaborative network together. So for me, thank you so very much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. And thank you for the team for running it all in the background, of course. I shouldn't forget them. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.